IVM.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into A Show About Crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM Podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 149 of Shunya One. Amit, how are you doing?
I'm doing great and excited for our one short episode of 150, the round number, which is the milestone number.
I know, right? I mean, I think we can come up with these milestones ourselves just to make a big deal out of it. But the fact is we have had so many guests on this show over the last 4 years. It's incredible. I mean, definitely think we've crossed the 4-year mark of our first episode release. And it just, I'm amazed at quality of conversations we've had so far. It's awesome.
Some of the best people to talk to. I mean, it's been great in that sense. But again, we are going to add to that list today with Nikhil Kumar.
Yeah, that's true. We're talking to Nikhil. He's the co-founder and Chief Evangelist of Setu. I've known Nikhil for a while prior to his, jumping on board and founding Setu, of course. And the chat we had was really interesting. I mean, another fintech company, yes, but they're doing some very, very cool stuff under the hood, especially.
It's all under the hood, right? Which I think is what makes it so interesting, right? The entire thing is, hey, we're about powering stuff and not about you downloading my app and doing stuff, but we want to make sure that this ecosystem works for everybody. So really, really impressive stuff that they're working on.
That's where Setu has some incredible platform level stuff going on. They're obviously on the forefront of a lot of the technology ecosystem the government has been launching. So yeah, it will be interesting to talk to Nikhil and hear what he has to say about all the fintech that's flying around us, which we are invisible to. So let's take a break, come back and talk to Nikhil.
Did you know that AI can help you recommend your next favorite podcast? In almost any field, AI can be an extremely important tool in your arsenal, but it can often seem daunting to get into. Luckily, Intel's Digital Readiness Program is here to empower everyone with the skill sets, mindsets, and tool sets to use in an AI-fueled world. So you can be ready to develop AI for sports if you want to as well. As part of Intel's AI for Youth program, Intel's been working with the CBSE, Ministry of Education, and the Government of India to empower today's youth to build social impact solutions while demystifying what exactly AI is. How do you take advantage of this? Purchase an Intel Core-powered PC, and you get free access to 80 plus hours of immersive and hands-on training about AI. On completion of the program, along with the certificate, you get access to AI tool sets to try to put what you learned to good use. So don't wait. Log on to futurebanowwonderful.intel.com. Future Banaw Wonderful by bringing home an Intel-powered PC.
Hey, Nikhil, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Shil. I'm doing very well. I hope you guys are doing well too.
Yes. I can see you're in a lovely, very green Bangalore office. True to, making us Bombay folks feel bad about living in the city.
There are only few things we can be happy about, right? Our trees and our weather. And then, Bombay beats probably in everything else. So
correct.
Do send some of your restaurants here. That's what we're missing.
I feel like Bombay is getting as bad or is catching up in the traffic space, though. We're fast approaching.
I want to get to that point in life where people's only problem with Bangalore is just not traffic anymore, right? So we can talk about other issues like how we don't have great restaurants and stuff like that. So.
Oh yeah, actually, those are the issues don't get talked about enough, is what you're saying. Stuff.
Like it's always traffic. Everyone's anchored around the traffic. Right?
Yeah.
So,
but it's true. Because it really is at that level, right? It's one of the few times I've been to Bangalore, right? It's not like I've been there that often, but the few times that I've been to Bangalore, it's just every time I go, I spend half the time in the car. A day trip is impossible in Bangalore, right? You cannot do a morning to evening trip at all.
I have done it.
Really?
The trick is don't leave the car. Just hold the car right there, step out, do your meeting, get some fast food, and just be in the car all day. That's basically the trick. And then the car just takes you back to the airport.
And for everything else, we have Swiggy and Dunzo. You can just Dunzo it to the next signal.
Exactly. Exactly. See, it all works out. So tech capital, but also, nice green capital as well. So, hey, Nikhil, so good to have you. It's as I was saying earlier, it's like this conversation has been long pending. I remember us catching up before you guys even figured out what you guys were probably doing. I think it was the usual.
We're still figuring out, Shil. So,
we'll come to that.
We haven't come too far. So,
we will come to that. But that was easily more than 2 years ago. And, in the world of fintech in India, you would think that every year is like a new revolution from the looks of it, right? I mean, at some point we were talking about how India is leading in fintech with all of its new, platform approach and whatnot. Then lending became a feature, then something else, then something every year. And as recently as earlier this month, there was another whole new thing launched. Now, which I don't really know enough about, but we'll get into it since you are the fintech guy.
I don't know if you remember this, Shil. We were basically, remember I met you at this co-working space along with Gaurav Baheti. I think that was probably just a little before the UPI launch and like when it took off and so on. I think it was sometime in 2016 when I was visiting Bombay. Right. I think like just in this 5 years, a lot of stuff has happened. I remember that particular conversation because I think we were running a hackathon. There was some hackathon going and, we all had dropped by. And then along with that, we were just doing some jam on the side and, figuring out some stuff to do. So, we've come a long way since then. 0 to 3.5 billion transactions on UPI. So
such a long way. And, jumping right into what you have been doing at Setu, or rather what Setu is, why this, Nikhil, to go a little further back also, why you and Sahil actually jumped into this problem that you want to solve. If you could give us, let's say, the origin story a little bit, or and personally also, why this was the biggest thing for you to sort of jump into.
For sure. I think, there's really there's no like big story as such, but I think I think it's important to kind of like also like know like my background. So my parents were rural bankers. So when I grew up, a bank actually was started in my house, in my ancestral house, which is now one of India's largest like rural banks. So when I grew up, the way I understood banking was it was in the service of the poor. My parents would go into these very deep villages every day. I've never seen them miss a day of work because they would be like, if I don't go, then, people will not be serviced, right? So it's like being like almost like a doctor, in some sense, right? If you see that behavior in doctors, they never miss work, no matter what.
Right.
They have to go, otherwise people will suffer. And that's how my parents' lives were. So when I was growing up, there were actually not much around. Nannies and others were not big of an idea then, but my grandma and, a bunch of house help had kind of like, helped me like, so in some sense, like when I was growing up, and I come, my family, my grandfather was actually an engineer. He literally, by the way, actually built bridges. So my grandfather was one of the chief architects of the Tawa Dam, which is the Narmada River Valley project in Madhya Pradesh. And it was one of the largest dams built at that time in India. So in some sense, there was our family has always been tuned to be, doing engineering. My parents were the outliers because, my dad decided to stay back to take care of his mother, join the bank and, their life basically revolved around like a district and going deep into those villages and, serving in branches and so on. So when I grew up, for me, banking really was like about service, serving people.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, I still think that, banking is actually a service. It's not really a product, and you actually service
Interesting.
people.
Right.
So for a long time, one of the things that happened to me when I was growing up is, we were whatever upper middle classes and, and so on. And a lot of things that we wanted to do in life was actually triggered by the fact that we had access to credit. My mom sent me to a really good boarding school for getting better education when I was in high school. And, it was transformative. And, to the salary and the money that she was making, it was probably not possible. So she was a financial wizard. So she was able to figure out, maybe I'll borrow a little from here and then I'll, put something with my gold here and so on. And did all this, financial gymnastics to be able to afford to send it. So credit was a way for us in my family to aspire and do more things, and, while there is two angles to a simple Indian household where, there is the savings angle, where people are always like, save, save, save. My mother actually was a little bit more about like, take credit to move forward in life. So even though we were not operating like a businessman, but, the family, in order for us to make leaps, we need to be able to take these risks. I mean, not in a crazy way, but for the right reasons. Right. So I didn't realize all of this till many, many years later, right? Until I started reflecting back. But I think some of this was, kind of, subconsciously in my head when I was growing up. And just like anybody else, I grew up and, went to an engineering college, didn't really give a shit about anything. I was a big metalhead in college. So I had this very dark, meandering period doing like metal concerts and stuff like that. And I think for me, life started after I got my first job, after I left my engineering. And that happened at Tally. And incidentally, my first job at Tally was to build e-banking inside Tally. And, over a series of things, many years. So my life's actually been very, I've been a more take life as you go kind of a guy, not really planned, but always, looking for opportunities, creating, new opportunities for myself and being able to and enjoy what I, to what I wanted to. So one such happy coincidence was how I landed up at iSpirit, and one of the opportunities that I got to do was to work on platforms like GST and UPI. And when I worked on UPI, many times we learn things by reading and seeing and stuff like that. But I think the best learning happens by doing, right? So, your beliefs become stronger, that forms your beliefs. So for me, UPI was one such journey. So when I saw this, that, hey, when you are able to get APIs very naively as a child, like saying, hey, if we get APIs outside the bank and give it to like a bunch of people and get them to build cool stuff, maybe these guys will build some cool stuff and, something will come out of it. It was just that simple, naive, childish thinking. And when we actually saw that happen, every year on year, new people coming on board on UPI, new customers and the new type of like products that got built. So I kind of had this fundamental belief that you could transform something, in a massive scale if you're able to create a platform, if it's a co-creation platform which enables people to participate, bring them together, and if you're able to orchestrate. And then I asked, Sahil and I knew each other. Sahil worked very early at Aadhaar. So in some sense, he had gone through something similar in his life very early, because he was part of the early team at Aadhaar and had seen, the beginnings of it and so on. So in some sense, we met together in 2016, and he was like almost like a guide, mentor to me, on many things and advice in life, girlfriends, and, all of that stuff. Yeah. So, when I was completing my fellowship at iSpirit, Sahil basically said, hey, look, I quit my job. I think we should do something together. And for almost a couple of months, we kept toying around with some random ideas. So one of the trip I was on at that time was like, how do we change the political system in India? Like, what if we create a new political party?
I remember that, I think.
You remember? So I think I might have probably spoken to you about it. So, I was like, what's happening? Like, there's so much technology and internet. I genuinely believe like, religion, political parties, they're all like billion-dollar ideas to be done in the next 20, 30 years, right? So
They are, I'm sure they are. Some folks are on it. We just have to get through the red tape like we did with finance.
Yeah, I mean, some people would consider that we're already there from a religion perspective, right?
Religion is happening.
Apple's a religion, Microsoft's a religion, Elon Musk is a religion. Many ways, like, they have some of the characteristics about there's some essays about this stuff, right? That some of the cult-like aspects that you see when it comes to these different quote unquote tribes that exist in technology, right, are very religious, very religious in nature and structure.
Many years ago, before this thought, I actually wanted to do a religion. So I'm sure also you watched Big Lebowski, right? The dude.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the dude. So, there was a point in time in my life, very embarrassing. My wife hates me for that now. But me and a couple of my friends, we actually used to talk to each other and walk like the dude. We were like, why are you doing this? This is how the dude does it, right? And when we came back home, we would become the dudes. And one day we actually went to buy the domain, and we said, so we used to keep saying dudism, because we're like, why are you doing this? Because dudism and shit like that. And we said, I think, look, this is what we have here is special. So we need to bring a bunch of people like this together. And we actually we went to buy the domain, and we were surprised that there is actually a cult called dudism.
Why wouldn't there be?
So you can actually go to Wikipedia. You'll actually see there is a cult, and if you look at their principles, that's the only religion that appealed to me, resonated with me. I'm like, these are my people, very, this thing about first principles, like thinking about like what are the major problems, and one of the things about working at iSpirit and with folks like Nandan Nilekani, Sharat Sharma, Sanjay Jain, Pramod Verma, and everybody else is like, when you're with as they say, like, when you're with a bunch of people and you become the average of them. So these are super, super smart people. So, for me, it was just like a chance pe dance to be amongst like all these amazing people. And they're all thinking about like, how do I solve India's like financial problem? And one is saying like, how do we solve like primary education? How do we solve healthcare? So the orbit at which we were thinking about problems itself was a different layer. Nandan used to say this, that the effort that it takes to solve an easy problem and a hard problem is the same. Is that you got to choose, which layer at which you want to operate. So that's where the political trip was coming from. I'm like, okay, it's a national scale problem. So what if we start a political party? And obviously AAP was, a big inspiration. And we said, what if we put platform, technology and all that stuff and like build like a community-driven political party of sorts. All of this non-venture fundable and stuff like that, right? So, around that time, I was just like I said, bhatakta hua atma, like thinking about problems. And Sahil and I, basically around in 2018, he became a dad. And, I don't know what Tashan happens to people. Then he's like, look, I'm quitting my job now. I want to do a startup. I don't want to work for someone. So we decided that we should work together, and we basically talked about a lot of different ideas and problems we wanted to solve. And another day, and we were not converging. And then we decided, hey, look, one day we were like, let's just take a step back. And what if we just agree on these principles that let's do what we love doing. Let's work on problems and let's align on those base principles. And then let's figure out what we want to do. So I think for a lot of people, it seems very obvious that, since I worked on UPI and things like that, that we would have built something like Setu, but it was not. We went through all this goal chakkar and all these things to arrive at this. And we said, what are the problems that we are mostly passionate about? And if you look at India, broadly, you want to solve like the roti kapda makan equivalent of high-level problems in India is financial services, education, healthcare, and jobs, right? Like at a macro economic level. So we said we don't know enough about all the other three things, but at least finance is something that we have worked upon. So why don't we continue our commitment to the problem that we were working on? And that's how we kind of like zeroed upon the problem area. And what do we do there? So our theory of change is that as India is a very extremely diverse country, every business and every individual's financial life is unique. So currently, the way you are, I mean, we might have common interests and things like that, but your financial life is probably going to be extremely unique compared to me, right? Almost like, it, like everyone, there are enough variables in each one's lives to make that unique.
Yeah. And everything, like what you save, how you spend, what you invest in, like all the variables is what you're talking about.
Not just that, Shil. No, also your social, your life around you. Your family situation. You might have parents, or you might have like siblings that you might need to support. So so there's all these other factors that determine how your financial life is. And for a long time, the way financial services is being done is you take financial products and you try to find the right people and distribute it to them, right? In the sense that, as many things, distribution has always dictated design of products. So we said that, if we were to flip this and say, how do we make financial products affordable and accessible to everybody in India? And that's our mission statement in the company. In order to do this, we have to do this, in these three levels. One is there is this amazing public digital infra that's being built in India, which is the UPI, Aadhaar, e-sign, so on and so forth, account aggregator, which is the talk of the town now. And then how do we leverage all of this public digital infra to design new financial products, which are relevant to each of these individuals, and then distributed them through these third-party applications or people or apps that you already use. So in some sense, UPI was that inspiration, right? So I genuinely believe 5 years ago, the idea that someone could build a payments app on top of banks was, unthinkable. That, like it was a category creator, right? There was no PhonePe or a Google Pay in our lives. So the moment you are able to bring out APIs and build an innovation system, you were able to now create these, and they were going and acquiring the customers and, and so on. So we said, what if we could do the same for banking products? What if we could do this for fixed deposits? What if we could do this for bill payments? What if we could do this for lending? What if we could do this for insurance? And that's how, and that's really our hypothesis, that we work with, financial institutions, help them leverage the best of digital public infrastructure that's available, design new financial products, and then distribute it through new channels that they never distributed through. So, for example, can the Ola driver, who actually is probably, taking a loan from some loan shark to run his, they might be borrowing on an everyday basis, right? Most of India borrows intraday loans. They take money in the morning and they're supposed to pay back in the evening, or some run on a weekly schedule. What if he actually could get access to a formal financial institution and get a loan from a bank or an NBFC at a much, much, much lower cost? It's insane the amount of cost that people pay. Sometimes people pay bare minimum 5% per day as their interest rate. So if you borrow 1,000 rupees, you only get like 950 rupees, right? So 50 rupees actually is deducted at source as your interest. And you have to repay $1,000 at the end of the day. So there is this massive, change that needs to happen. I think genuinely we are still in our early days of the internet in India, in financial services. I think it's the 90s of the internet. I think there is the 2000s or maybe the 2000s of the internet. Probably. I think there is still a long way to go. And I think that end goal is when probably money becomes self-driving, right? So, just like how the world started with GPS and internet then, and now we are dealing with the era of self-driving cars. I think money will also, this will happen to money as well. maybe in the next 10 to 15 years. So what we're trying to do is how do we build infrastructure to make this happen? What do people need? And who do we need to work with? And how do we, imagine and reimagine some of these questions, why things work the way they are. So Setu, in some sense, is a bunch of curious finance and tech geeks just asking these questions, saying, how do we reimagine? How do we re-engineer these things? Yeah, and that's really what we are doing. And the name Setu is basically a bridge and many jokes. So the way we arrived at it is we said, what's the closest we can find to API in Sanskrit? And and we said, APIs are nothing but software bridges. It connects software applications together, and so there we are Setu. So yes, that's really our story. So
wow, super interesting stuff.
Brilliant. I mean, Nikhil, there's so much detail I want to unpack in obviously to, get into the meat of the matter. And thanks for giving us this overview. But what I'm going to do is take a quick break and come back and dig into the building of Setus that you have. So, Amit, Intel's impressing me yet again.
You heard about Intel vPro, huh?
Yeah, I did. Exactly. Imagine you're a security and IT manager. There's nothing like Intel vPro out there. It basically helps you protect your entire organization's computers from cyber attacks and basically keep them functioning all the time.
I know exactly what you mean, right? Cybersecurity is a major deal these days, right? I know that both at work and at home, I'm really taking a lot more care about these things than I used to.
Exactly. And the way I see it, right? Intel has obviously developed this a lot. They have something called a threat detection technology. They have something called a hardware shield. It's basically everything that you need to protect your entire organization from stuff like ransomware, crypto mining, all of these latest sort of threats that are out there.
And what's really cool, it's not just that, right? They also have this below the OS security, which is basically used for hardware and firmware changes to identify when stuff happens over there, or when there is malfeasance happening on your application or data protection stuff. This really helps with memory corruption, all that kind of stuff, right? So they're just basically kind of helping to really reduce the number of attack surfaces an organization has.
That's what a business needs, right? Pretty much a business wants that, okay, I have one platform and I get all my checkboxes around, all these various small things that I need to protect it. So it's good to see that Intel is developing a platform that's built for businesses.
Yeah, and it really is, right? Even the cloud-based manageability of all these services, right? So basically everything can be done remotely. Whether it's managing or repairing these systems, you can just, basically nobody has to go anywhere, especially in these times. I think that really does help.
Oh yeah. During work from home, it's basically exactly what you need. It's it's a godsend sort of technology.
Amen to that. And so remember, everybody, just go check out Intel vPro and Intel's other amazing products at intel.in/IT heroes. Remember, Intel vPro, it's built for business.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Nikhil, you've been explaining, obviously, exactly the amazing origin story of how you arrived at, what Setu is doing today. And we have a few, questions to to unwrap a little bit of that. Amit, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, Nikhil, from what I understood of how you guys have implemented, right? You're working with banks, you're working with software applications, you're working with both of them, right? So I guess two questions here, right? It's culturally very different to work with a bank versus working with a app developer or something like that, right? The way that you would approach them, the cycles in terms of how long decisions take to make all of that, right? So how do you all navigate that? And a follow-up question that somewhat is also, who pays you, right? Fundamentally, do you get money from the bank? Do you get money from the app? Or do you get money from both in some sense? Or however that works?
Super. I think what's important to know is as you rightly said, who are we really here to serve? In whose service are we in, or who's our actual customer persona? And the answer to that is the users that we really want to service, consumers and businesses in India. And our mission statement is can we have a positive impact from a financial services perspective with at least 500 million people in 5 years. So when you want to do something like that, you work backwards from that goal. So now you need to think very differently. And the way we have done this is that, so what do consumers want to do in India? So now, for example, people had to get a digital identity, people got bank accounts, and now people are being enabled on digital payments. So the question that we asked is, what's going to be the next what is the second order effect of you being digitally enabled on UPI, right? The first order effect, we all know you can send money, blah, blah, blah. So for example, bill payments was such one low hanging fruit as an example. The one obvious thing that will get digitized is the more and more bill payments that's happening in India, right? Commerce will get more and more digitized. CODs have to come down, right? So like 60-70% of e-commerce orders are still CODs today. So these are your second order effects in some sense. What we have done is we have basically looked at the user's life and looked at a consumer and looked at a business and said, what are the different financial products do they need in their life, right? And how can we create these digital financial products? And, you know, a lot of people have, like finance, I think, has been running on this arbitrage of complication than simplification in the last few years. And I think this is like generally true for a lot of businesses, right? So the more information arbitrage. And I think financial services is one of them where people have, you know, worked towards complication, not towards simplification. So I think that, you know, so the way we have been thinking about it is a bit of counterintuitive to say, how do we simplify and what are the different products that a user will need in their lifetime? So for example, you'll need a bank account, you'll need a payment application, you'll need a deposit account, you'll need some investment products, you'll need insurance, and you'll need credit. So broadly at Setu, we've kind of characterized our infrastructure into three large areas: payments infrastructure, data infrastructure, and accounts infrastructure. So what we believe is, you know, if you can put together the payments and data infrastructure together, you'll be able to create these new accounts, which is like, you know, an FD product or an RD product. You know, it could be a liquid fund or whatever it is.
Or something else. Basically, it need not follow current structures, is what you're saying.
It could be a crypto token for all we care, you know, and, you know, you'll probably need the money rails for money in and money out to happen. So if we look at this from a Lego blocks perspective of financial services, so these are the three kind of like large infrastructures that we need. So what we do, Amit, is we look at the user's need. Where is the world going, or where should the world go in the next 3 to 5 years? So we have a point of view about the future. And maybe we are right, wrong, we don't know. Only time will tell. But our job is to have like a point of view. And we have a point of view saying that this is how the world is going to shift. And, you know, what are the products that users want? Once we identify that, we then go and identify what is the supply side, which is essentially who are the financial institutions do we need to make this happen. I want to give credit to the banks because, you know, in the last few years, especially with the advent of UPI, there is a sea change in the way they think and believe, right? You know, more and more banks want to partner. You know, in 2017, I can tell you, I used to come to Bombay and like talk about API banking, and I would start with full form of APIs and explaining why, and, you know, and so on. Yeah. And today in 2021, we are in a place where every bank has their own developer platform, developer portal, and things like that. I think Indian banking, you know, has come a long way in the last 5 years than actually we give credit to the bankers. I do think there is a sea change that's happening. So that's the second very important stakeholder that we work with. So many a times it's really not the intention of the bank, but it's whether the regulations, the compliance architecture allows us to do this, that what we want to do. Once we have supply side ready, then we say, okay, for these products, who are the right demand partners that we need to work with? So in some sense, you're absolutely right, but we look at this like a triangle. So you have user on one end, you have a financial institution on the other end, and then we have the, you know, app or the developer or the distribution partner on the other end. It's just that all of this kind of converges around, like, you know, like people say API is UX, right? So, so, you know, you start with the user, you figure out what is the user experience you want to deliver, and then you work backwards. So within the company, we have two sets of people. We are learning also to do this well, which is a set of people who are extremely empathetic towards the banks, who work with the banks and work with them. There are people who are extremely empathetic to the developers and the tech companies, and, you know, working on our docs, our SDKs and stuff like that. And then there are people who are super empathetic to the users, right? So it's been a learning journey for us, but like that's how we are kind of structured.
Can you give an example of like how you've kind of put this triangle together in some ways? Like, again, you all have a number of APIs out there right now. So maybe just kind of like, an example would help illustrate how these three stakeholders kind of play together.
Perfect. So I'll take a couple of examples. So one, let's just take, payments infrastructure, right? So, while there is so much room for, yet we have so far to, there's so much distance to still cover in digital payments, right? So there are a lot of use cases that are still cash bound in India. So for example, one of them is, let's say, like loan recollections, as an example, right? We have taken, say, something like UPI infrastructure from the bank. So we said, we work backwards, saying what is the most, so somebody in a tier 2 or a tier 3 town, let's say, who's taken a loan from a lender, what is the most seamless experience for them? And we said, look, why can't a loan repayment be as seamless and as painless as making a mobile recharge or an electricity repayment? Because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're taking money from your account and giving it to somebody else. So one of the things that we have done is, for example, is work with a number of financial institutions, lenders, and banks and NBFCs, and we have brought them onto what is called as the Bharat Bill Payment System. And once they've been onboarded, so you can now open up a Phone Pay or a Google Pay. So an example of this is, let's say, there's a bank called Ujjivan Financial Services, which serves bottom of the pyramid. And Ujjivan's customers are people who are partly digitized, but are on the path to getting digitized. So if we were to take 3 to 5 years from now, most of Ujjivan's customers are most likely going to have a smartphone. So Ujjivan is now live as what we call as the biller, which is essentially on the Bharat Bill Payment System. And an Ujjivan agent can go to Shiladitya or it could be even an agent calling him and saying, Shil, your loan needs to be repaid. Can you just open up, if you have a UPI app, can you open up Phone Pay or Google Pay, enter your loan account number, make a payment, and then the payment flows seamlessly from Phone Pay to Ujjivan, and you don't have to visit the branch at all, which might be like 5, 10, 15, 20 kilometers far away. This is just like one simple example of working backwards from the user side. Another example, is fixed deposits. So this is something which is very counterintuitive, right? So, there is a part of our lives and our worlds where we are like, FD is a bad instrument. We should not invest money in FD. It should go into the markets. We should get people to start into mutual fund and SIPs and so on and so forth. But, that's the top of the pyramid problem. Right? The bottom of the pyramid problem is that the money is still going into real estate, gold, and chit funds, which are like much riskier and bad instruments. So we said, how do we reimagine fixed deposits digitally to users? And what if ordering a fixed deposit was as simple as ordering a pizza on Swiggy or Zomato? And we work backwards from that because we ask people, where do you save your money? So we run a research lab called D91 Labs, where we just go and talk to people and just ask them what their financial lives and stories look like. And it's very clear that people want to keep money in FDs. So whether it's, is that the right thing for them? Maybe yes, because, they don't have enough money to actually graduate, instead of putting money into chit funds and so on. So we took that user view and we went to a banking partner and said, hey, bank, can we create an FD flow which is so seamless? Anybody can without need. So one of the problems with FDs where banks forced you to open a savings account or a current account. So to open an FD.
And then move the money. Yes.
And then move the money. So we went to the bank and said, hey, guys, why do we really need to do that? Why can't we just open an FD account directly with you? And we were very lucky. We had great banking partners. So they worked with us and they gave us the APIs where we could directly open an FD. Guess using what? Using Aadhaar and UPI. So the cost of opening the FD was so low, which is, less than like 15 to 20 bucks. Now we were able to shrink the size of FDs that you can book. So right now we're doing it 5,000 rupees. We want to bring it down to 500 rupees and eventually get to a place where we can also allow you to create like a daily savings product, for example, right? And then we built this FD product and then we are now distributing it through a platform like Google Pay. So Google has a platform called Spot, which enables any business to have a flow or an application flow inside Google Pay. So Google Pay is a reference implementation of this product. Tomorrow, this could be done on a Flipkart website if Flipkart wants to sell FDs, or it could be done on an ET Money or a Paytm Money, or it could be done on an investment app like Fisdom, or and so on and so forth. Right. So this is like another example of how we are trying to reimagine financial products and make them digital, sachet-sized, and distributed through new channels that they were not done before.
Awesome. Thanks, man. That's actually super. It helps clarify. It really clarifies the idea. Sorry, Shiladitya, please.
Yeah, and see, I remember you said earlier, right? The reason you're able to do this, obviously, is the current base of infrastructure we have today, the various distribution channels that exist today. So you're building more rails that exist between these existing bigger rails in a way.
One way to think about it, Shil, is that infrastructure, when you build, needs to lead to some form of innovation and not just efficiency improvements. So a lot of the current things that we're doing has just been about like, how do I improve my efficiency? But not thinking that this is an enabling infrastructure. It's like, look, I'll use the internet. I could probably, send emails. Maybe that's like the first use case. That's great. But, there is a Facebook and an Instagram opportunity or a Tesla opportunity that's going to come in the future. So what we are trying to see is that, all of this is enabling infra. We know that you can collect money digitally in India. You can now do KYC digitally in India. You can now get data digitally in India. What is the second order effect of this going to be? And that's the question that we keep asking. And, and maybe like I said, some places we might be right, some places we might be wrong. But, a lot of us thinking has been like I said, to have a point of view of what will all this enable? What's the point of all of this? Is it to save some dollars on your acquisition cost, or are you going to fundamentally redesign? It's like, imagine if there was no GPS on the internet, the car companies still manufacture the cars the way they are, right? So, you need a Tesla moment to happen where people like fundamentally redesign things and make an orbit shift. And that's really what we're trying to do at Setu, try to be like a product studio for new digital financial products to be built. And and prove them one by one, build confidence, and get more and more partners. So some of these are low-hanging fruits that I was talking to you about, which is like bill payments or whether it is fixed deposits. What is exciting is the unknowns. So we don't know what will happen, and that's what excites me the most. So
yeah, and what I was getting at was also obviously the innovation is something you guys are doing. You're still dependent on the banking partners, like you said, obviously the folks like Google and distribution channels who choose to, use your innovation to sort of distribute it. So you're still a product company in that sense, right? These are the products you're building. There'll be many more such products which you will reimagine. So what is?
By the way, so we've been kind of so obsessed about this, like we almost are operating in a place where a little bit like Google for financial products, if at all, if we were to think of the way we are structured, a lot of work went into like building engineering infrastructure, which enables our engineers and PMs to envision and do things. So if you see, we launched and went live with our first product in March 2020, right? 15 months later, now we have almost 7 to 8 products live.
Massive,
we grew, and it's post-pandemic. So if we were able to do this in 1.5 years, and as you know, the pain, a lot of pain of a startup is also about building the company itself is a product. And so finding product market fit of the company itself was a hard part. So now I feel like, we have done the first summit. If we were able to do all of this, in our, young, hungry, scrappy way in the last 15 months. I'm like, okay, there's so much more we can do in the next few years, because you have all your compounding effects. Like you have people, you have infra, you have partnerships, so that's kind of been the one of the most exciting things, because you are right. So we are a product company, and like our job is to reimagine some of these products day in and day out, and we want to measure ourselves on the number of products we build, and also very happy with on number of things we will fail. So something that we are trying to learn, because usually as a startup, given that our risk tolerance is so low, you have only one shot at getting right in life, right? We have taken a little bit of the path not not very often taken, which is like become like a lab and do all of these experiments and see what flies. So now whether,
and knowing some will fail,
100%, and we're still learning on how to take
of course.
that.
Of course.
But yeah, that's kind of how the journey has been. So.
And that's a bold approach, to be honest. Like you said, not most startups do that. It depends on probably your vision, your conviction, your investors' conviction behind you to sort of do this. But I think it's also what was needed. Yeah.
One important thing also is, it's needed. And second is also, why do we not do this, is also like, what is the cost of doing these things? In the sense that typically what happens when you think about a product, you're thinking about like 5-6 PMs, you're thinking about 30-40 engineers, on a kind of an average decent scale. At Setu,
this is very Bangalore statement to make, but okay.
Maybe
10, 15, 30, 40. Like, no, usually Bombay is like, do mil gaya na, theek hai, we'll make something.
I think so given that it's so hard now that so we actually have kept our input costs down. So, all of our products are actually 1 PM, 2 engineers, 3 engineers. So we're literally like 2 pizza teams doing all of these things. And the way Sahil and I have been thinking about this is like, we're like a little bit of like capital allocation managers. Like, one is human capital and the other one is like actual capital, and empowering these small teams to go out and solve problems that they are passionate about.
Nice.
So usually when we are looking for people at Setu, we are like, dude, were you trying to solve some fintech problem and did you get screwed by, integration or by the market? Come here. This is the place. You solve for people.
Very nice.
So it's kind of become a house of, people who have been bruised and who have been in the battle of building fintech products and say, come build this infra so that someone else should not go through this pain.
Which is pretty much everybody working in this space like more than 5 years ago, right? Because it really has become much better. As you mentioned, the banks have become much more cooperative. But I remember hearing stories from people back then that you couldn't get anything done. If you had to work with a bank, that's where things went to die. So it's great to hear that changes there. I wanted to I interrupted you when you were answering the earlier question, right? A little bit about the business model. If you could just give us some insight into how that works.
For sure. Again, going back to the idea that I was talking about, simplification, I just want to simplify things. And, there are just 2 business models in financial services, honestly, probably 3. The one is what we call as transaction-based business model, right? So usually for enabling infrastructure like payments and data, it's a transaction-based business model. So every time, let's say, Ujjivan collects money from its end customer, there is a small fee that they pay for collecting that money. And in the payments world, it's known as MDR, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the only way to monetize this is to operate this at high volume, right? So, and it's gone are the days. It's now a low margin, high volume game, right? So that's one business model. So every time a transaction happens, we make money. The second business model is AUM based business model, which is every time you bring in a deposit or every time if you make a sachet size loan happen, you get a percentage of the amount. Right. So these are the only two business models. Honestly, banks, fintechs, everybody, you can basically represent all of this in just these two models. Either people have transaction pricing or people have, AUM based pricing. There is, I think, a third business model that is yet to emerge, which is not there yet, which is the services angle, which is I strongly believe that I started, I
So this is
always
the
felt
crypto example.
no, I felt like banking is always a service, right? So,
Right.
if you go to a bank and you say, boss, I want my bank statement for the last 6 months, they probably charge you like $150. You withdrawing money from an ATM is actually a service. So you pay 25 rupees. While those services will probably cease to exist because, as things get digital, I think there is another probably, I don't know, a large value to be unlocked in actually advisory services to common people. Today doesn't exist, and I think an example of this exists in the form of RIAs, in the SEBI world. You have investment advisors. For example, you can go to Small Case today and, a subscription fee to somebody like a Capital Mind. And suddenly you have access to the best minds and you could be somebody in Assam. And, you don't need to be in Bombay anymore. It seems like still to make money.
Yeah.
So you can be actually in a small town in Assam and get access to this advice. I think the advisory services is currently only focused on, the top 1% of the country. I do think the rest of the 99% will also require that service. I think, India is a service-driven economy. Even in a small town, someone goes and gets a shave done, even though they can get it done. So I think there is a notion in all of us that people don't want to pay in India. I think it's a little bit of a misled notion from the fact that we have used, a reverse incentives to acquire users and things like that, right? Like I started my career at Tally. Everybody pays for Tally. I mean, sure, there are people who use pirated Tally, but, as times change, people are ready to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think this notion of people will not pay doesn't exist. Like if you have to go see a doctor, you pay money today. So I think there is a equivalent of doctors who can look at someone's financial life and give some good advice. Because today, everyone who gives advice is misaligned incentives. They are trying to sell you a product. Your banker will come and tell you, sir, आपको term insurance लेना ही है क्योंकि ये आपका माने life change कर देगा types, right? The reason why he's saying all these things is because the sales incentives for the month is aligned to this. I think there is no one in the service of the customer today. And I think that's the missing gap. And that gap can probably get filled if all these things happen in digital. You'll probably have like a services/advisory layer. We are seeing that already happen in education today, right? So what is edtech really? What we were not able to solve through physical teachers, we are, better teaching. So people are getting access to these guys, in some, and I think there is probably some convergence of fintech and edtech that could happen like 5 years from now. Like ticker tape, for example, is a great example, Shil. I'm sure you use ticker tape.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is probably a ticker tape for 100 million people equivalent that might be. It might not be on stocks and stuff like that. It might be probably something else on
just prudent financial advice and bundles you might want to use given your object. Yeah, actually, so many of them. A lot of this goal-based investing is also I've seen become a trend, right? I think you just have to package it right.
Chartered accountants, for example, right? So everyone uses CAs today because their taxes are so complicated. You can't do GST, you can't do income tax. So even if it's a 100-200 rupee kind of a business per year, if you're serving 100 million people, you're looking at like $100-200 million revenue business. So I think that is yet to be unlocked. So it just comes down to these three things, Amit. One is transaction pricing, AUM based pricing, and the services pricing.
So I get the broad models, right? But so does a bank so basically if or does it depend, right? Depending on the service, I'm just trying to if for a company like yours is
in a transaction pricing business model, it's usually the person who's consuming the service. For example, let's say, Ujjivan wants to use our e-sign APIs. Let's say, okay, IIFL wants to use our e-sign APIs and to power their, account opening flows. So whenever they make a transaction, they pay us like a fee for that, right?
Okay.
So that's on the consumption side. Whoever consumes the service and is
the one who makes it
is one way. In the case of the AUM-based pricing, at the end of the day, it is the value that we are adding to the bank or an NBFC.
Correct, right.
So what usually when we go to banks and businesses, we don't talk to them as technology service providers. We basically say, guys, we will actually be think about us like almost like being a digital branch of yours. And through APIs, we will drive business to you. So you measure us on the business that we drive, and then you pay us the incentive for driving that business.
Makes sense.
And we usually share this revenue that we make with the partners that we work with. So it's like we follow this principle called the work done principle for pricing. So basically based on the it's very popular in the telecom world on how the interconnect charges are set up, who gets what, and so on. Essentially, it's really like about the kind of work that we do and how much should we earn and how much should we share. So,
and all of this is obviously there's so much innovation you just spoke about, right? Especially, I love the world that is yet to come in a lot of ways. This is so much more democratized, all obviously digital. The fact that you guys exist, right, and are building this means you no longer are, initially I was going to relate to you as the API only sort of building the plumbing of the internet or the plumbing of the financial world. But clearly you've added the value very quickly on top of that. So you're not just the Twilio comparisons of the rest of the world, right? It is a lot. It is a few things more than that. So this value addition, I had an earlier question, which is just what is stopping others from building this value themselves? I'm just curious as to the VC question about moat. Obviously, the labs approach, I get it, but given that these rails are fairly available now and encouraged to be used. And banks talk to us now and throwing red tape at us. What's stopping others? Do you think that, or do you think innovation will come from more and more places all over in fintech?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I genuinely think the way we see our role is to play the role of can we accelerate all of this? If you ask me, will this happen without us? I think the answer is for sure yes. So I think, will this happen without us? The answer is yes. The way we see our role is playing the role of an accelerator. What could happen in 10 years? Can we make that happen in 5 years? And, and so on. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, and as and VCs are also right about this, I think for every business, these problems still remain, which is whenever there is value getting created, there'll be a lot more people who will definitely run towards wanting to do this. Yeah. I think, there's really nothing you can stop about, especially in the game of innovation. If it is invention, I think, we're not doing that. We're not say, trying to figure out how to build the next quantum computing, or solving a problem like that, right? So, so I think the value creation layer for us is building a great first is understanding this domain knowledge, and like I said, a lot of our problem is just about predicting or figuring out where the future is going to go, and I think that itself requires a lot of thinking and and a lot of risk about being comfortable about being wrong as well. So that's number one.
Your job is just showing what is possible in that sense.
in the sense like we are not building for the problems of today, but for like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like that's number one. I think second, building a great distribution engine like everybody else is is important. Third is add enough value in your product so that people don't have to go to anyone else. Luckily for us, coming back to the API story, honestly, for all the song and dance that we do about India and a land of devs and all of that stuff, we don't really have a high bar for APIs. Honestly.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many companies do you know? Where is, we know Twilio, we talk about Stripe,
Postman.
we have friends in Postman, Browser Stack, and that too,
Yeah.
It is possible, but there aren't enough examples, right?
That's true.
And I think
That's true. Not enough. Yeah, not enough. Clearly.
And I also think it's a function of where we are as a technology ecosystem in India. The Valley has been around for such a long time, where devs actually make a decision about which product to use and so on and so forth. I think that shift is happening in India. When some of our customers that we talk to, the devs make a decision. It's very clear when we talk to a few companies which are global and are coming to India, they ask us for uptimes. They are like, dude, your P20 response is like this much. Why is this, like this can't work for us. Like this has to be better. Whereas when we talk to an Indian equivalent, they're like, ye margin kyun itna kam hai? Like, this thing. I think that shift will happen. I'm at least like making a bet on it. And honestly, it's a wide space. There aren't just good, beautiful APIs in India, and there are pockets of these APIs available, which is a sign that this is to come. Okay, let me frame this problem another way, right? I think there are going to be more APIs in the future than there are today, right? Whether it is for
no doubt.
Whether many things, right? So like across this thing, and I think that people really obsessing about product managing APIs, building a developer experience for this, I think that's a skill that is yet to be built. And I wish that there are more and more companies do this, because I think like as an ecosystem, we will generally, bring the bar high. Today, the bar is so low that we put a lot of love and effort into writing our docs, and people don't really give a shit about it. But like, we're like, okay,
Someday, yes, I know the feeling.
We will continue to do what we want to do. So, but like, someday people will give a shit about it. So.
Nikhil, on that note, I mean, it's a perfect time to sort of plug if you guys are hiring, some closing thoughts. What are you looking for? You've obviously spoken so much about the kind of people who are on your team. So clearly a lot more folks like that would love to join you. So you want to give your Twitter handle or something where you can...
Oh, yes. People can follow me on Twitter @Nikhil Kumar KS, NikhilKumarKS. You can follow us on Setu_API. So, on to people, I think like, you should actually go to our team's page and check out, there's a lot of, a lot of our identity as a team has also been defined not just by finance, but also by music. So a lot of, we do a lot of cool stuff at Setu. One of them, which I'm really proud of, is like we have a Slack channel where we discover and share music every day, even if someone's not doing work, but there's at least music running in the company. So much so, I think we are probably one of the only few companies who has put out a public playlist of the company on our website. So you can actually go check out our Spotify playlist, and you can judge us by the kind of people that we are based on the music that we listen to. But jokes aside, as I said, we are working on stuff that will basically change, cutting edge stuff. We're working on things like UPI, which will change, which has changed and will a lot more change the way we are building real stuff, right? So you'll be able to see that impact of what we're doing. We're working on things like BBPS. We're working on things like fixed deposits. We're working on loan products. We're working on account aggregator, which is essentially this consented data sharing framework, which will basically change our own lives. for me, the biggest joy of building UPI is that I'm a super happy customer today. Every time when I use it, I'm like, God damn, it still works. It works as expected. I think the opportunity at Setu is to build stuff which is real, which can be experienced by people around you, people even by ourselves. As Sahil keeps saying, it is incumbent upon the best of us to build for the rest of us. So it's very important. We are all in a privileged position. We have gotten here. We've been blessed with Saraswati, smart people, and it is important that we put our time and energy into solving for real people, and use software to solve users' problems. So we are hiring across functions. I would love to work with people, who have a creator's mindset, who want to change on product. On the engineering side, like everybody else, we're looking for amazing folks to come and join us. And one thing that we can assure you for sure is if you come to Setu, and if at all, whenever you leave, you will definitely leave as a more wiser, a learned person. We focus a lot on learning as a company. It's one of our cultural values. So if you're here to learn, if you're here to build meaningful stuff, please look us up. You can look at us up. You can look up all the open roles on setu.co/careers, and you can mail me at nikhil@setu.co, and would love to chat.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thanks, Amit.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to kind of remind everybody really quickly that it'd be great if you could give us a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this. If you're on Apple Podcasts, ratings help, reviews help. Wherever else you're listening, if you can rate or review this, it'd be great. Also, do reach out to Shiladitya or myself on social media if you want to discuss this conversation or any of the other conversations.
Absolutely. Nikhil, thank you so much. This was enlightening, as always. And of course, I loved the range of topics that we were able to cover. I mean, it's a perfect, I would say, afternoon chat where we were able to talk everything from the Big Lebowski to building future financial products for India. So amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shiladitya. Thanks so much, Amit. It was such a pleasure. Looking forward.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Wire Talk, Siddharth is joined by Nikhil Anand, an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania and an environmental anthropologist. They discuss his plan and proposal to the BMC to fight the effects of climate change that we are already seeing in Mumbai. In the podcast special on Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet talks to the hosts of New Kids on the Block, Anya, Kavya, and Tarek, about what it's like to be Indian teenage podcasters. In the season 3 finale of Echoes of India, Anirudh explores South Asia at the time of its most famous ancient figure, Ashoka Maurya. On All Things Policy, Suyash and Aditya analyze the constant changes of China's generals in their liberation army and what it means for India. And on Smarter with Sid, learn from Siddharth how listening can help you make a better presentation. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really does help us. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quota, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Paisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.